Hello my friends and welcome to another Tuesday of tutorial. I am Leonardo Perez Nieto and today, because you requested it, I have a long video for you. Here we will sketch a horse with oil paints. This is the long version of a short tutorial I published some time ago. To begin, I toned the canvas with burnt sienna and mineral spirits. And I'm using a 3/4 inch flat brush. The list of materials will be in the information of this tutorial. I am doing this rough, what I mean is unevenly, because maybe I leave it like a total sketch and this could be a nice background for something like that. Or maybe I decide to paint over it, which is fine too. I think I will make my mind fully once I see the horse and I see what it needs behind him. But for now, the most important thing is that we have a tone on the canvas and that it is not totally white, because it is difficult to see the tones that we add, the values, against the white. Let's add some stripes over here and take off some of the dark spots down here. Good, now with a small and bristle brush and with mineral spirits, I will erase or take off some of the paint to start sketching the horse. But what I am doing is pulling some lights, so I will only do this for right now in the areas of light. That is, especially the surfaces that are facing up, like the top of the head, of the neck, and of the body. And also of the legs. The overall shape of the head, on this position and viewed from the front, is a little bit like an elongated diamond. The neck, and let's draw the shape of the torso. And this is not necessarily in the light, so I don't need it white, but I do need to mark it because it is anatomically so important. And from it we can draw the legs. In this case, the front legs. From this angle we can hardly see the arm and shoulder, but we see here the forearm, the wrist, and below this point will be the hand. The elbow will be up there at about the height of the lower line of the body, and of course the hooves will be like the fingernail at the end of the middle finger. And here we have the forearm of the right leg, the wrist, and the hand. I'm still using mineral spirits to take off the paint. And the hoof. Now the back legs, with the heel here and the foot. The hoof will arrive down here. I'm doing it very sketchy, of course. This part probably will be catching some light, so let's take the paint off, like so. Now let's do the other back leg. It will be here. The knee, the heel. I'll take some of this paint off. The foot, and the hoof will be all the way down here. It is time to add the mane. Since our horse is running, it will be like flying in the air. The mane, I mean. And the body should come down like so. Maybe a little bit more. I will leave it like so for right now and we will see. And now, with a sepia extra, which is a dark brown, we start marking the darker spots, the areas in shadow, like the middle of the neck and the shadow produced by the head. As well as the mouth and the nostrils. I'm using a small and bristle brush also for this. It is actually the same one I was using before to sketch the figure. And we do the sides of the face or the snout up to the eyes here. There is often a shadow in the middle of the head, like here, depending on the lighting. Some of the mane here will go up like this area could be in shadow, and the ears. Let's go over the line of the neck, and then the mane. The part of the mane that is closer to the neck could be also in shade. Over here we'll go over the other side of the neck. We can start doing like a shading effect by adding darker shades to the darker areas and a lighter version in areas which are in shade but not so dark as the other ones. We have a monochromatic sketch in the sense that we are using just one color over the white, however, we can apply it in different intensities. And as we go, we can also review and correct or refine our shapes, like this one, which should be curving a little bit. I had drawn the leg a little bit too long, or way too long actually. The hoof should arrive only here. And the back leg, which, as it is in the back and under the horse, will be all in shadow, pretty much. The back part of the horse will be over here, rounded, and then darker. And we have the last leg back here. Now I think the horse starts to have a shape. I like it how it is looking. I wanted this sketch to be pretty loose. The tail will be flying in the air over here. I was telling you that I want this painting sketch pretty loose, like this so far. I don't want to have it look stiff, which sometimes happens when you add too much detail or too much clarity. Now I take some titanium white and put it on the areas of the most light, which as I clean the map with these mineral spirits, now it should not become muddy or something like that. Let's add a shadow to land the horse, right here, so that it is grounded. This whole area in front will be in shade, so let's darken it. All this area down here will be ground. Let's add some light to the mane. And also we add light to the upper part of the body. The parts of the legs which are facing up should also be catching some of the light. I add some paint here following the roundness of the neck, and then I can smudge it with the other soft brush. This will be a white horse, but of course we will not paint it all white because all the areas that are in shadow are much darker. We can add a little bit of the dark paint and then sort of draw with it, moving it around and smudging it as needed. I add paint and smudge. At this point, this is almost like a dry brush technique that I am painting with very little paint. At this point, I will take some of the paint off near the ground to indicate the dust that is being lifted by the run of the horse. Let's lighten up this whole area down here. It should be lighter right by the feet, and then the cloud should dissipate a bit as it goes up. Also, in between the legs there should be some dust. I'll do a little bit more work in between the legs. Carefully so that I don't erase them, but I want to lighten up the spaces in between them. I will use a bit more mineral spirits so that we are able to take off more of the paint. Since it was drying out already, the paint, then it's a little bit harder for it to come off. But with some mineral spirits on the brush, it does come off. And now I add some of the sepia, some of the dark brown, to increase the shading. And let's paint the eyes. The head looks a little bit smaller to me. I will make it bigger, both a little bit wider and longer. I add some highlights above the eyes to indicate the roundness. I'll widen the nostrils just a little bit, and we could practically leave the sketch like this, as a study for a bigger painting or something. But I will carry through and add a lot more paint to it, and make it more painterly, both on the horse and also the background. As I mentioned earlier, this will be a white horse. However, only a few spots in the painting will be actually white. Most of it will have a tonality because of the shades and shadows. Here I mark the pectoralis muscles. Actually, I will wipe them off because they should be just a little bit higher. Over here, these two highlights. And let me check the proportion. In this particular position and from this angle, the size of the head, one head down, should arrive to the upper part or just above the pectoralis, which seems correct now. I am mixing the titanium white with cold black to get the grays. Measuring a second head down, it should arrive to the upper part of the wrist, right in the position that this leg is, and therefore here I need to lift it up just a little bit. I also lift the rest of the leg, and consequently also the one on the back. All the legs were too long here. This way will look much more in proportion. And I will fill in the ground with the brown and gray. As you see, I'm using a pretty small brush, even for this wider space, because I like the texture that it is leaving. And I add a little bit more of a bluish. Good. Now let's do that background. And I want that cloud of dirt really visible. So it is going to be this white. Let's not forget in between all the legs, like that. And it will lift up like this, although I will mix up that with a darker tone because the cloud will be disappearing. But the background overall will be pretty light too. Like so. That tone more or less, I like it. That gray. And I am applying it also with the small brush. And actually I could be using a wider brush and I would get this done a little bit faster. But I like the feeling and, as I told you, the texture of working with a small brush. And here will be just slightly darker. Obviously because the dust is lifting up, our cloud is lifting up, so on the sides it becomes a little darker again. And I blur and smudge this intersection in between the two tones of gray, so that it is pretty smooth, like that. I have to say, I'm liking a lot the color and tone of the background, and I don't like so much the ground. So I may do something about that. And I darken just a little bit here, also to show the cloud better. Because as it was so light, you could barely see it anymore. I will reduce this side just a little, like this. Even if I lose part of the tail, it is not a problem. I'll paint it again in a moment. And I will change the shading of the horse. Rather than this warm brown, I will replace it for a much colder gray, similar to the one on the background, to integrate it. A darker gray in this area, in the middle of the neck, which is getting more shade, and a bit lighter on the sides. We should add some white here to show the space. Good. And the gray on the other leg. The oil paint is very forgiving. As you can see, I have been switching the colors, and as well as I'm still correcting a little bit the shapes of the horse and the legs and everything. You can keep modeling and changing and improving as you go, unlike other techniques like watercolor, which are much less forgiving. And now the tail, which will be of a somehow darker gray, especially the areas in shade, of course. The top of the tail will be much lighter with some really whites on it. I want to paint the ground gray, as I mentioned to you earlier, but I don't want to make a mess or make it muddy with the paint that was there. So that's why I wiped it off with a rag, and now I can apply the new one, which is the color I want. Close to the edge, I want it to be much darker, and then on the lower part it would be lighter. I think that would help contrasting the air from the ground and also the horse, and we don't want to make it too heavy and everything dark, so we'll come lighter on this part, on the lower part. And I will blur the edge a little bit. I don't want it sharp. You can blur edges with a clean brush and you go over brushing it very lightly without pressing and without adding more paint. I mean, you can blur also with a little bit of paint if you are using the same paint that is already there. I think I need an even more intense white down here. Good. Yes. Let's add some lights to the tail. It is pretty flat otherwise. And I blur them because I don't want them sharp, which would look a lot more stiff. They need to look soft and in movement. So we blur the edges especially. I don't fully like how sharp these legs look down here because I think some of the cloud should be covering them, hiding some of them, like so. So I will add some of this foggy effect by the legs, on the legs. That looks better, don't you think? I'm referring to the foggy effect by the legs, but I will make it even with some lighter spots. Of course, the front leg that is on our right is coming forward and therefore is not affected by the dusty cloud. That should look a lot sharper. I'm slightly correcting the shape of the body right here on the side. And I smudge it. As you can see, sometimes I just add paint in little blotches and then I smudge them a little bit. I really love painting with this technique a la prima, that is in one sitting, and where you can keep working on it because it is wet. It is really enjoyable. And the oil medium, the oil paint, is remarkable for that. I think we definitely need more white on the upper parts, like this, because it is supposed to be a white horse. And also let's add it in some spots that are catching light. And we smudge. Even though this head is pretty white and is catching a lot of light, it's not all even, so we paint slight shades on it. We added some slightly darker gray and we smudge it. Let's add some highlights to the upper part of the head and just above the nostrils. Good. And some light reflection on the upper part of the nostrils, as sometimes they can be wet and therefore they can reflect light. I'm very sorry I missed a shot after a small break. Somehow I didn't start the camera right and I didn't record when I drew the mane, or when I painted the mane rather. But it was a similar process to the tail, except that it was with much shorter strokes. Sorry about that. And we add a little bit more light to this area, to the back of the horse. Good. Let's smudge and integrate some of these shapes. And I will blur some of these lines just a little bit. I don't want sharp lines, especially back there. At this point, I'm mainly softening edges, softening lines or changes of tone. Very good, excelente! I like it how it is looking, this little sketch. I think it has what I wanted at the beginning, which was a looseness of stroke and not looking stiff, which was more important to me than the detail. And if you made it all the way to this point, I would love to know it. Please in the comments write me the secret code, galloping away. And let me know if you cheated and skipped all the way to the end. It's ready. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe to Fine Art Tips if you haven't done so already. Let me know what do you think about the long tutorials, and I will see you with more creations on Tuesday.